The Flying Dutchman is one of the greatest and most well-known cases of a ghost ship. It is so popular, in fact, that the legend has lasted over 400 years and is still going strong, especially after the ship was featured in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Over the last 4 centuries, several sightings of the ghost ship has been reported, one of the most famous being from a man who went on to become the King of England. The story is one of mystery and intrigue, which has sparked the imaginations of poets, playwrights, painters, and loads more professions beginning with P. But how true is the legend of the Flying Dutchman? I'm Bleaky, and in today's video we take a look at the case of the Flying Dutchman, a crew that was doomed to wander the oceans for eternity because of an unintentional deal their captain made with the devil when facing a maelstrom. So, pull up the anchor, secure the rum, and fly the Jolly Roger. It's time to set sail, me hearties. The reason why the Flying Dutchman's story grew so popular is understandable. For some, it was a fascinating fable that entertained macabre sailors, while for others it provided a supernatural explanation for the strange sightings witnessed out in the furthest reaches of the ocean. Sailors have long been superstitious folks, with many myths and supernatural entities being driving forces in their lives. For example, the Klabuterman, which is a sprite that would help sailors with their tasks, with some even claiming that they were saved from falling overboard by this entity. Not all of these supernatural beings were good, however, with beautiful deadly sirens luring sailors to their deaths by singing to them and showing off their naked forms. Now, you might think it's weird how this kept happening after hearing the stories, but you have to remember that after months at sea, a little thing like murderous tendencies was worth the risk. We all have baggage, right? One of the many stories that passed around the sailors were sightings of the cursed ship, which they took as warnings of impending doom or life-threatening maritime conditions. But where did the story of the phantom ship begin, and how much of it was true? In the legend, the ship that was to become the Flying Dutchman started out as a Dutch ship owned by the East India Company. This ship would travel between the Netherlands and the East Indies, transporting exotic goods such as silks, spices and cloth back to Dutch ports. Sometime between 1680 and 1729, Captain Hendrik van der Decken and his crew set sail as usual, successfully reaching Asia before loading up and heading home to Amsterdam. Captain van der Decken was incredibly homesick, however, and decided that the shortest route home would be around the Cape of Good Hope. Sadly, this turned out to be a very bad decision, as the sky turned black and the waves began lashing at the hull of the great vessel. Before they knew it, a terrible storm had broke out. The terrified crew begged the captain to turn back and find safety at the mainland. Now this is where the story splits, with the earlier version claiming that the captain had agreed but realised it was too late to head back to harbour. In the later version, however, Captain van der Decken refused, instead ordering his men to stay on course. Some claim that the captain was drunk, chugging spirits in fear of the outcome of the ship, while others claim that he went crazy. Regardless, the captain refused to turn back and instead steered the ship straight into the storm. The spray of the sea whipped the captain's face as he held firm onto the ship's wheel. The crew were certain that they would perish unless they did something to turn the ship around. This led to a mutiny, with the leader of the rebels approaching the captain with his dagger in hand. Before he had a chance to use it, however, the captain plunged his sword through his heart. He then lifted the body up and over the side of the ship and let the unforgiving ocean swallow him up. As he did so, the captain cried, "I shall navigate this ship around the Cape, even if it takes until doomsday." From behind, the captain heard a voice calmly say, "I see." As he turned back, he found another person was facing him. This time, however, it wasn't a mutinous crew member, but the devil himself. With steam evaporating from him with every raindrop that touched his skin, the devil smirked and said, "I accept your terms and the soul as payment." The devil then told him that he and his crew would sail the seas for eternity until doomsday arrived. Van der Decken pleaded for another way to save his soul, in which the devil explained that if he found the love of a faithful woman, he and his crew would be free of the curse. The devil then allowed him to return to land every 7 years in order to find love. Regardless, the storm twisted the ship apart and dragged it down into the cold, murky depths where the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans met. Soon after, the ship appeared again, this time crewed by the spirits of the Flying Dutchman. For the centuries that followed, sailors spotted the ghostly vessel sailing just below the waves, and sometimes even sailing right beneath them. The ship wasn't just limited to the Cape, however, with sightings being reported all over the world. Now, this does sound like it could just be a made-up fable to teach people about how arrogance and recklessness could end in tragedy, but the strange thing is, many sailors during the 18th and 20th century saw this phantom ship, often with several sailors seeing it at the same time. The first reference was documented in a book written by John MacDonald in 1790, which was called Travels in Various Parts of Europe, Asia and Africa during a series of 30 years and upwards. With a title like that, who needs chapters? In that account, the author describes the weather being so stormy that they saw the Flying Dutchman in the distance. As the years passed, more sailors would report seeing the ghost ship, manned by its damned crew. This was seen as a bad omen for the voyage, with Vanderdecken warning them not to follow in his footsteps. Or maybe he was just looking for his future Mrs. Vanderdecken? Who knows? In 1835, a British vessel reported that they had almost crashed with a ship that appeared seemingly out of nowhere during a huge storm. This large ship sailed swiftly towards them under full sail, as if it was unaware of the sailors waving their arms and screaming to turn course. Before impact could be made, however, the ship just vanished, leaving only the breath clouds of the panting sailors in their view. The most compelling sighting came in 1881 when the future King of England, King George V, was sailing aboard the HMS Bugden, a British Royal Naval vessel. At the time, George was serving as a midshipman, with Prince Albert Victor also on the ship. In the early hours of July 11, 1881, while the Bugden was moored in the Bass Strait off the Australian coast between Melbourne and Sydney, the royal party saw the infamous ghost ship appear at 4 a.m. In the official log, the Prince wrote, "The Flying Dutchman crossed our bows, a strange red light as of a phantom ship all aglow, in the midst of which lights the masts, spars and sails of a brig 200 yards distant, stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow. The officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did the quarterdeck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle, but on arriving there was no vestige, nor any sign whatsoever of any material ship was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm." The log also included a sinister detail that gave credit to the Dutchman's reputation of bringing bad luck to seafaring folk. One of the 13 people who saw the phantom vessel slipped from the top of a mast, dying from his injuries the following morning. In 1939, several people visiting a beach saw the Flying Dutchman sailing along the South African coast, which was reported in a local newspaper. The article said, "With uncanny volition, the ship sailed steadily on as the Glencairn beach folk stood about keenly discussing the whys and wherefores of the vessel. Just as the excitement reached its climax, however, the mystery ship vanished into thin air as strangely as it had come." 4 more witnesses set eyes upon the Dutchman when it sailed into Table Bay, which overlooks Cape Town. As they watched in fear, the ship slowly vanished into thin air. Several years later, in 1951, writer Nicholas Montserrat wrote that he had witnessed the paranormal phenomenon while he was serving as a Royal Navy officer during World War II. Just like the other accounts, the ghost ship simply faded away. So, were the accounts of the future King of Britain and other sailors over the years true? The sad truth is, it's really difficult to verify the details of the legend. Many researchers have tried to find a trace of a Captain Hendrik Vanderdecken, but no definitive proof has ever been found. With that being said, some people have tried to link the name to a Dutch captain called Bernard Folk, a man that has been verified. Folk became a legend in his own merit, especially when he was alive, as his voyages were the fastest of the time. In fact, his ship was so fast that it led to rumours that he had made a deal with the devil to achieve such feats. For example, in 1678 he sailed from Java to the Netherlands to deliver a stockpile of letters to the Dutch governor. This voyage took just 10 days when it should have taken 3 months. I'm not trying to encourage any deals with the devil, but if my Uber Eats delivery driver is watching, there's a tip in it for you if you can get my McMuffin to me in under 5 minutes. Just putting it out there. What is certainly true about this story is that the Cape of Good Hope was infamous for shipwrecks. It was first explored in 1488 by a Portuguese explorer called Bartholomew Diaz, who noted that the weather was unpredictable, the currents were strong, and the rocky shores were deadly and often unavoidable. This led to the area of sea, located at the tip of South Africa, being named the Cape of Storms, before John II of Portugal renamed it the Cape of Good Hope. It is also true that many ships chose to risk the shortcut in order to cut voyage time. just like how the homesick Captain Vanderdecken, in twisted irony, ensured he would never return home again. So even if the Flying Dutchman is nothing more than a superstitious legend founded as a cautionary tale, it certainly immortalised the reckless captains who dragged their crew to their dooms. Stories of cursed ships, crewed by the dead, have been around since classical times. Some believe that the origin of the ghost ship story comes from the Teutonic belief that the dead have to cross the sea to the afterlife, a belief that Tolkien paid homage to in the Lord of the Rings books, with the elves travelling to the lands of a man. So if the Flying Dutchman was nothing more than a fable that has been spread throughout the ages, how could all the sightings be explained? Well, one possible explanation is the Fata Morgana phenomenon, which is an optical illusion similar to mirages. This kind of illusion causes the ship sailing far away to be reflected, sometimes appearing to be floating above the surface of the water. If the atmospheric conditions are just right, the rays of the sun create the image of the boat. As they are projected miles away from the original boat, those seeing them can't see that it's a mirrored image of another ship. Going off the log of the HMS Bugden, we know that the sea was calm and the night was clear. The only problem with this is that there was no sunlight to make a Fata Morgana happen. Also, the stormy conditions of other vessels that saw the Flying Dutchman makes it less likely that it was an illusion that they saw.
The seas be ours and by the power, where we will we roam.
So, was Captain Vanderdecken and his cursed crew sailing the Flying Dutchman through the desolate ocean for centuries? Or is it an incredibly complex optical illusion that even fooled a member of the British monarchy that is to blame for all the ghostly sightings? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch more supernatural and paranormal content, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And until next time, sleep well, friends.